There's basically two types of logic. You have the symbolic logic and you have the Aristotelian logic, which is the old classical logic. Now, the main difference between these two types of logic is the starting point. With Aristotle's logic, with the classical logic, you are starting with the idea that you can trust your eyes, that human beings, any human being, knows something. You know something already. And I'm not just talking about you kind of know something, you know something for certain. Whereas the assumption going into the symbolic logic, in most of the symbolic logic textbooks that you're going to encounter, the assumption is that you cannot trust your eyes. You don't really know things for certain. Because with Aristotle's logic and with Aristotle's philosophy, because that's what it comes down to, the philosophy and the epistemology of Aristotle, with Aristotle, knowledge begins with sense experience. And so everybody already knows something absolutely certain. In other words, you know with an absolute certainty that this is a computer in front of you. You know you're watching a video with absolute certainty. What else, what other things do you know with absolute certainty? Uh, that if you put your hand up, that your hand is right here, right? So those are things I know with absolute certainty. I know with absolute certainty I'm talking right now. I know with absolute certainty that this is my hand. With the symbolic logic, you are not starting with that idea. You are starting with the idea of the of a lot of the modern philosophers, which is human beings don't know anything with absolute certainty. And you can't really trust your sense experience. So you don't know that your hand is in front of you with certainty. You can't know that. And so with the symbolic logic, what 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 they go in with is that you can know some things with more certainty, such as mathematics. So that mathematical type of deduction is what you can know. That gives real knowledge, according to some of these philosophers that write some of the symbolic logic textbooks. A lot of the modern philosophers, what they say is that you can know with more certainty rather than just trusting your eyes. You can know with some more certainty those deductions that are made mathematically. That's why the symbolic logic is mathematical. It is a mathematical type logic. Now, keep in mind, for Aristotle and for a lot of the philosophers that say you can trust your eyes and your eyes give real information, like you really can know things with your eyes, which is the common sense viewpoint, by the way. Most people start out with the idea that you know things, like the grass in front of you is real, your car that you just started is actually real. You know that's your car. Most people start out with this viewpoint. In fact, I would say all people start out with this viewpoint. But a lot of the intellectuals and philosophers don't end with that viewpoint, largely due to some of the modern philosophers, beginning with Rene Descartes hundreds of years ago. So this is the major difference between the Aristotelian logic and symbolic logic. And what I was going to say is that those who practice the classical logic or the logic of Aristotle, they see no incompatibility between the classical logic of Aristotle and symbolic logic as it is, without the assumptions of the modern philosophers. Okay, so for those who follow the logic of Aristotle, there's no incompatibility between doing those syllogisms and all that stuff in Aristotle's logic and the major philosophical assumptions that you can trust your eyes. Your eyes give real information. They see no incompatibility between doing that and going on to do the calculation that you see in symbolic logic. But what they're saying, those who follow the premises of Aristotle, that you can trust your sense experience. Knowledge begins with sense experience. We all know things for certain. What they're saying is that you what we find in symbolic logic is you can know things with certainty, but the more you get into the symbolic logic and the calculation, the further you get away from sense experience. So the less you know. In other words, the knowledge narrows. I mean, think about this. When you do mathematics, you start off knowing things absolutely for for sure, and they are broad. Okay, you have two oranges, and then you have another two oranges. You can actually see oranges. You can see two oranges, and you can see the other two oranges. And you put those together, you have four oranges, and you could see them all. That is certain. But when you start talking about 4 million oranges, and then you add that 4 million, can you see 4 million oranges simultaneously at the same time? At the same time, maybe if you have a picture from from above of 4 million oranges, you can technically see them, but you can't really tell they're oranges. So you're already losing something when you have big numbers. When you have these large numbers like 4 million oranges, and then you have another 4 million oranges, then you add those oranges together, you get 8 million oranges. Can you see for certain all of these oranges in their detail? No. You have lost something. You have lost contact with sense experience. So you are getting some certainty with mathematics, but it is narrowed. Your knowledge is now narrowed. Now it is narrowed to mere quantity because you cannot fully comprehend all of those oranges with your sense experience, but you can add 4 million oranges plus 4 million oranges and get 8 million oranges. So the quantity remains. In other words, your knowledge of the situation has narrowed to pure measurement. This is what you get with symbolic logic. Symbolic logic, there is usually how it's presented is arguments with so much symbols that we lose contact with ordinary sense experience, whereas Aristotelian logic, it keeps more in line with arguments that people make and things that we can observe with sense experience, because that is the ultimate test for a conclusion, is whether it matches what you see. So with the symbolic logic, sometimes we get these big arguments using these complicated symbols, and it strays far from what we see because most of the modern philosophers ain't concerned with what we see because they say that you can't trust sense experience. So why would they be concerned with it? And so what you get at the end is a very narrow conclusion based on what? Based on quantity, based on what can be measured. So you get accuracy with symbolic logic, but the accuracy, you have to give up something. You get preciseness, you get something that's precise, but you have to give up something. What are you giving up? All that other knowledge that you have. So you are stuck, or you are confined to the knowledge of quantity, which has to do with measurement, which has to do with mathematics. That's what we say symbolic logic is mathematical, because the end product is a knowledge of quantity. Whereas in the old logic, Aristotle's logic, the end product, it should match common sense experience. Not just any common sense experience that has been tested, common sense experience that has been tested. And you are not losing all of the areas, all the other powers that human beings have in order to know, because we know by mathematics, we know things by mathematics, but it's very narrow what we know quantity, we know number. Like if you say, yeah, I know that guy over there, and they say, oh really, yeah, what's he about, what's he like? And you say, well, he weighs 148 pounds. He's 5 foot 8 inches tall. His arm is 48 inches. And the person you're talking to be like, whoa, okay. Do you know any more about this guy? No, no, I know him, but that's what I know about him. The person you're talking to would think you're kind of crazy, be like, well, you don't know this person at all. All you did was give me measurements. Because just giving measurements and quantity is just a very it's an important part of our knowing, but it's just one aspect of our knowing. This is why Aristotle gives the categories of being. In other words, these categories of being, quantity, quality, passivity, activity, these are all areas of being by which human beings know things. And so that these are the major, in my estimation, this is the major difference what I've been going through here over between Aristotelian logic and the symbolic logic.